All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I have the McKinsey team here on stage with me, and they're all set to present the report findings. Going to be a very interesting segment right after lunch. So let me hand over to the McKinsey team whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for patiently sitting with all of us since all the sessions that we have done through the day. I think so, as she mentioned, this session we will talk about the highlights of the report that was launched earlier in the day. And before we start with the highlights, I just want to first give a huge thank you to the IBAI team who's worked with us hand in hand to actually publish this report. We would also like to thank all the brokers, the insurers. We've done about 35 plus broker, 10 plus insurer conversations, and a lot of the I think for some of you who are present here in the room and who also spoke to our team, you will see a lot of the perspectives and insights we will also show in this report and the highlights that we will have here. We have about 30 minutes to basically present the highlights. I wouldn't say we will do full justice to it, but we'll try to cover most of it. But we also have a detailed print copy, etc., which is ready, which I'm sure some of you have already taken and started reading through. Our report, it has essentially 4 parts, and the way we were actually thinking, let me just take the coordination. I hope I'm audible now. Great. So our report, essentially the way we have structured the report and the perspectives in the report is across 4 parts. We are talking first about what is the overall vision for the country when it comes to insurance, which I'm sure we are all aware about, Insurance for All 2047 vision. And we are talking about where us as an insurance industry, as an insurance ecosystem are, which is the first part of the report, and I'll talk through the highlights in a bit. The second part of the report is where we start deep diving a little bit into what is the distribution ecosystem that we have, and particularly within the distribution ecosystem, what is it for the brokers here? And I'm sure some of these insights, archetypes, etc., that we will talk about will also resonate with all of you. And then we move to the next 2 sections of the report, which are more about, okay, we understand, let's say, what the vision is. We understand where we are as an industry, where we are as a distribution channel. But now, where are the pockets of opportunity for us? And when I say us, again, I talk about the brokers, but also the broader ecosystem and how the brokers can really play a role in enabling the vision, which is Insurance for All 2047. So that was the objective or the problem statement that we were trying to solve for through this through this report that we have published. We'll spend a few minutes on each of the sections, and then we'll also open the floor to a few questions that you all may have on what we have in the report. If we begin with the first one, which is Insurance for All, which is, like I mentioned, this section particularly talks about what is the state of us as an industry today. And I'll not take too much time, but I'll talk about 3 key insights that we were talking about here. Number 1, again, not new to all of you, but if we compare the penetration that we have both for life as well as for health, we are far behind what we see with some of our global peers. And here I'm not comparing ourselves necessarily to economies like US, but similar sized economies. So if you see here, if I look at the light blue bar first, which is the non-life insurance penetration, we are almost 1/3 of what you see for similar sized economies. For life, while prima facie it looks like we are at par, we are 2.8, others are, let's say, 2.1, US is 2.6. Most of this penetration, and again, I don't think it's a new insight for all of us, but most of this penetration is actually coming from investment-linked product and not actually pure protection. So, like I said, prima facie, this number may seem at par, but if you actually break it down and if you look at the pure protection penetration number, we will be behind some of the economies that we see. So that's the first message we wanted to land, that there is a lot of opportunity, because if we look at mere penetration numbers, we are way behind some of our global benchmarks that we have. Number 2, if I look at even within the Indian economy, we ran some interesting analysis, and I, at least personally for me, this was a very interesting statistic that came out, is that if you look at banking, and of course banking, as an industry has gone through much more advanced evolution compared to, let's say, what we are now starting to go through as an insurance industry. But if you look at banking, 9 in 10, 90% of Indians who are above the age of 18 years on an average today have a bank account. If I take a similar number for life insurance, this is 1 in 2 Indians above the age of 18 years have life insurance, and 2 in 5 have a health insurance. The reason we wanted to bring out some of these insights is to show the stark gap in terms of, if I look at our own country's financial economy, how much potential there is for the life insurance and health insurance to increase in terms of the penetration. So that was the second message that we wanted to give from the report. And just go to the third one. And the third one, which was related to the point, now we understand the penetration is low if we compare it within the country, we compare it across countries. But one of the key points that we were making is that accessibility is one of the biggest levers that is driving this low penetration. And to illustrate that, we just took one example of rural as a segment. And if you see here, our GDP contribution, 45% is contributed by rural. The population split, 65% is coming from rural. But if you see the distribution of the branch network of life insurers, it's only 2% which is actually there in the rural part of the country. This is just one example of accessibility that we were giving. As we go into the report, as we go into the opportunities, the insights, etc., there are a lot many more segments like this which are coming in terms of accessibility, and also intent is there to buy insurance, but how do we make the distribution also sort of more accessible to those customers? So this was the first section where, if I were to just recap, we are just talking about there is a lot of opportunity where we are as an industry. And now in the next section, we'll deep dive further into what is the role that the brokers are playing today in the industry before we move forward to what is the opportunity ahead. I'll hand over to my colleague Kamlesh to take over the insights on some of that.
Am I audible? Thanks, Abhishek. If you thought that was a lot of numbers, we have a lot more coming your way. Like Abhishek mentioned, right, this is a chapter of the report, and we genuinely hope you get opportunity to read this weekend. It's a big report. We've worked hard on it along with the IVI team. But second chapter really focuses on 3 things. Like we said, no one sitting in a room probably does not know this intuitively, but there will be insights on segments, where are we penetrated, etc., which might be new, or at least for the first time somebody has put them together, saying where does the opportunity lie. The 3 key messages that we want a section to take away is, obviously we all know insurance broking is very heavy in institutional side. Retail health and retail life is where we are starting to make our mark due to the advent of new models which are now done by some of the brokers, but that's growing. So far, that's not been one of our core areas. This one is interesting. We've compared 2 different periods for private equity inflows into the insurance broking sector in India. And we have seen a 20x jump in volumes in the 6 to 6 year period, and we'll go through that, and a 2x jump in the number of deals that have happened. The third is, I'm not going to touch this here. I'll actually go to the page and I'll take this in detail. Yeah. We spoke about this. Very, very dominant across all lines. That's group life, group health, marine, fire, liability, and motor. Retail life and retail health. Retail or health obviously doing much better. But those are the 2 where we see a sharp change which is happening. And that's basically down to the new models which are getting innovated in the market. We spoke about the private equity inflows. That's the number. From 2011 to 2017, you had 21 deals. Is this better now? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I kept quoting numbers, not realizing you couldn't see them. So like I said, the number of deals have gone from 21 to 40. The volume at the same time, it saw a $0.2 billion investment in 2011 to 17. In the next 6 year period, it saw 4.8 billion. This is the vetted data which tells you we have really made ground on this one, but we are much lesser compared to some of the other countries where the private equity flows are much larger. So the best of this is yet to come as we look forward. Natasha, if you can go ahead. So there are about 735 brokers in the country. And by no stretch of imagination, I think it is possible to put them into a clear archetype saying this is exactly the type of broker you are because of the nuances that each one has. We've still taken an attempt and categorized all 735 of them into 5 main archetypes. I'll take you through a quick 30-second level on each one. Relationship-driven brokers are where you have the relationship. The customer counts on you for advice, risk advice. He trusts your guidance on the risk. You continue to build that relationship, and might the insurer might change, he'll continue to hold the relationship with the broking account in that case. That's your relationship broker. Obviously, one of the largest size by sheer size. There is captive brokers. This is where the broker in most cases owns the customer. The customer is owned by him. To give you an example, what comes in captive broker, because it looks like a large size, is the MIS piece, which is basically the broker owns the customer, so on and so forth. You have franchise brokers, which is the new advent, someone like a Turtle Mint, etc., who are using their franchising model to spread into tier 2, tier 3 towns and creating a presence not just in Insti, but as retail as well. You have specialized brokers who are either focusing on a specific segment or a particular product. For example, there are brokers who are specifically looking at rural markets only because that's where they feel the needs are not met and there's a lot of opportunity to be created. So that's your, and the fifth one is a digital first self-serve. While it's been a while that India has had a big, large digital broker and there are a few more making inroads into it, they are creating a large presence on the retail side. By the true definition, I know they are the broking category. They are not a typical broker, but a very different model nonetheless. Because of the sheer definition that IRDA has, this is the fifth archetype of broking that we have. I'm going to run through some of the pages very quickly. The 24 numbers obviously are known to you. The life insurance GWP is 830,000 crores. The way we see it, in the next 5 to 6 years, the market is expected to grow by 10 to 12% and reach a number of 1400 to 1600. Our push is that it needs a lot of structural levers for it to continue to grow something that has done in the past. Maintain a growth of 15-17% and reach 1850 to 2000 requires a lot of structural shifts. And the number that you see at the bottom of the chart tells you what is the life insurance penetration by GDP. We're currently at 2.8. If we do a 10-12% growth, given the way our GDP has been growing, we'll reach a number of 3. The push from the market would be to get it close to 3.8. Like I said, not going to happen if a lot of structural factors don't come into place. Similarly, on the non-life insurance side, that's the last year's number, obviously 293,000 crores, poised to grow to about 550 to 6,000 crores. The way it has been going, and I mean, yes, it's been a mix of a good year, a bad year, a good quarter and a bad quarter, and so on and so forth. But if that was to grow to 13 to 15% and reach about 580 to 630, it again requires a lot of structural shifts. Abhishi spoke about that. The 2.8, 3.8 looks a good number, though it has underlying fallacies. But that's the number which really has to pick up and reach 1.2% of the GDP. There are a lot of numbers and you have them in the report, so I'm not going to bore you with a lot of details. But what we have done is, we have cut the total retail market by the income segments. I'll just take 30 seconds to explain. The first one is HNI Plus. This is at the household personal financial assets. That's not annual income. So you have about 1.9 to 2 lakh households in India whose total personal financial assets cross 8.5 crores, so on and so forth for affluent and mass market. That tells you what is the size of life insurance GWP that segment contributes to. Obviously, if you see, despite being a very small fraction of the households, HNI Plus continues to dominate a large part of the life insurance GWP. Obviously, by the sheer numbers, it is a very high in health insurance GWP as well, but not as compared to the life as well. What we expect to happen over the next 5 to 6 years is, one, obviously with the rising influence, we expect that the number of households itself will go up. Obviously, the affluence levels increase further, but we also expect there's a slight shift which will happen. We see a big shift in HNI. The reason for that is the demand for the kind of health insurance that they see is changing. The kind of products that they want in the market is changing, and we see that to be a big driver of growth as far as the health insurance is concerned. We're going to quickly run through. We spoke about retail, where are the segments and where do the customers lie. Similarly, what we've done is we have broken the institutional market also by the size of the companies. So you obviously have the mega corporates, large corporates, mid-market and micro and SME. You obviously have the revenue numbers available for each one of them. That's the number of companies. So you have 650 to 750 companies who cross a total revenue of 4,000 crores. As you can see, the micro and SME is 6 crore in India. But that by definition does not tell you, because we've further broken down SMEs into small, micro and nano. Very small numbers in the number of companies for small and micro, much higher penetration of insurance. But if you look at the true micro SMEs, where they need the insurance cover, we continue to see a very, very, very low penetration. Obviously, the large corporates are 99, mega is 99, large corporates are 95, and mid-market is fairly well adequately covered. Most of the people want to play in that market. It is very well competitive and congested already. We feel the next set of opportunity will come from this particular sector. Yeah. So the point that we're seeing, this is the value pools or the premium spends that you see today as per the category. Obviously, the level of penetration we spoke on the previous slide. How do we see it evolving over the next 5-6 years is, if you see, we expect all the segments to grow, but we expect that micro and SMEs will drive the growth further. This is a segment that needs insurance. The product innovation, the model innovation has to work in that favor. Currently, it is not viable for you to go and cater to the needs of a SME, but we expect that with the change in the outlook and the innovation that is happening on product and model as well, we expect them to be the driver of growth for the next 4 or 5 years. Obviously, the mega and large corporates are very big in size. So after 5-6 years also, that is where we are expecting the micro and SMEs to reach. I'll now hand over to my colleague, Natasha.
Sorry, before Natasha takes over, I think the only thing I will highlight is, of course, the previous slides were a lot of numbers, and now you will see a lot of insights that we have from the survey that we have done. The objective of showing both the numbers as well as this survey is because I think a lot of this data at the granular customer level, I believe exists with all of you at an individual company level. The idea of publishing this in a standardized manner was also so that we as an industry can actually refer to from a customer standpoint, retail standpoint, where the opportunity is, from an institutional standpoint, where the opportunity is. And particularly on this one, I mentioned it in the beginning also, but a huge thanks to all of you who have worked with us as well, right? To also sort of give us some of these insights, which then we have been able to tally at this level. So we saw a few numbers. Now we'll talk about a few qualitative insights now, what the customers want, what they are looking for. And then we'll bring it together in the end to say what does it mean for all of you, all the brokers sitting here from an opportunity standpoint.
Thanks, Abhishi and Kamlesh. Before I jump into the survey, just want to reinforce what Abhishi just mentioned, which is that nothing that we found so far in either the value pools or the surveys is counterintuitive, right? These are insights we all, you especially, intuitively know because it's what you see with your customers day in and day out. Except this has never been documented before. This has never been published before, and definitely not been legitimized the way it has through this report. So the idea here is to create a starting point almost to say, this is where opportunity is. These are the different segments on the retail side, on the institutional side. This is the value that they offer. This is what these customers want. And therefore now the ball is really in the court of all the stakeholders of the ecosystem, insurers, brokers, regulators alike, to really sort of think through and use this report as a mirror on what is it that will take to chart the course towards insurance for all. So this is not an end state, it's more like a starting point. With that said, for this report, we did a primary market research survey, one on the institutional side, which had a sample of about 2,500 retail customers. The sample was fairly representative, which means that it encompassed retail customers across age groups, across salaried and self-employed occupation types, across different levels of affluence, So we had customers with an annual household income of less than 5 lakhs, and also customers with an annual household income of more than 50. And of course, other demographic parameters like gender, age, and so on. On the institutional side, which is essentially the businesses and the corporates and the enterprises that exist in the country, we spoke to about 100, and this included representation from retail, manufacturing, services sectors across different scales. So companies that have less than 50 crores in turnover to over 1,000 crores in turnover. Different vintages, so companies that have existed for less than 1 year to those that have existed for over a decade. And also different, scale measured in terms of number of employees. So that having been said, what did we really look at through this survey? We really tried to understand what these customers experience at different stages of their insurance life cycle. So what does their awareness look like? What are their pain points, expectations, and barriers to purchase at the purchase stage? And then what is their experience, or what is it that they really value in the post-purchase or the after-sales leg of the journey? So if we look at the retail survey, right, one sort of startling find was that awareness is actually not an issue. Intent is, and this really debunks a myth, because whenever we talk about insurance, the sort of leading narrative is that awareness is missing. But what this tells us, this chart, if you look at it, on the life side, 70% customers believe that their life insurance cover needs to be about 8 to 10 times their annual income. Yet if you ask them how many have a cover of that nature, less than 10% do. We see a similar story reflected on the health insurance side as well, which means awareness is clearly not the issue. It is intent, and it is the lack of sort of value perception in insurance to which sort of doesn't allow people to convert their awareness into purchase. If we look at what influences purchase, or who rather influences purchase decision, right, we see that varies by customer segment. So for affluent plus customers, which is affluent HNI, UHNI, we find that trust and trusted advisors are sort of the key drivers to purchase. So you'll see that 75% plus of these affluent customers would rely on a broker or an agent to make their insurance purchase. It reinforces the knowledge that insurance is a trust-led industry and a trust-led product. The mass market finding is even more interesting, because we see that 50% actually rely on their friends, family, and community. And even though an equal number is reflected on the broker and agent side, I would not hesitate in saying that these are likely to be sort of folks from the community itself who act as agents. So people who customers know to be their friends, family, buy insurance from them, but are agents. When we look at pain points and challenges with purchase, right, this one's interesting, because what you will see is that on both ends of the spectrum, the needs are different, and the kind of sort of challenges that customers struggle with are also different. You will see that mass market customers struggle with more fundamental things, such as premiums being too high or policy terms being too complex, which means they don't understand the product. And perhaps the reason to also feel that the premiums are too high is because they do not see value in it. Whereas HNI customers, the affluent plus customers, are more likely to say that the policy that they have does not meet their needs, indicating a potential lack of customization in the market for this segment. On the claims side, next. On the claims side, this one's interesting. What you will see is that affluent customers are largely dissatisfied with the claims experience that they have today. So 50% plus have said that they've considered switching their insurer or their channel of purchase after a claims process. And 22%, nearly half that number, have actually gone ahead and changed, right? We do not see this kind of problem occurring on the mass market side, which means, one, knowing that claims is the biggest sort of marketing when it comes to insurance, there is a need to differentiate the claims experience based on segment, and for the HNI segment, which tends to be more experience focused rather than price sensitive, there is a need for sort of an end-to-end white gloved claims experience. Sorry, can we go back? Yeah. Even on the kind of assistance that is expected in the claims process, we see that mass market customers, their price sensitivity kind of gets reflected here, saying they're more keen on the kind of amount they get, whereas HNI customers are more sort of keen on getting assistance with documentation, which sort of again reinforces the belief that they care more about the overall experience. That's sort of the highlights of the retail survey. This is not it. These are just highlights. If you look through the report, you will find a far more detailed sort of commentary around each of these. But in the interest of time, we'll move to the institutional side. This one's interesting because what this chart will tell you is the reasons why different institutions buy insurance. And it's stark in saying that mega and large corporates, who are most likely to have internal risk management functions and an intrinsic understanding of risk protection and the need to manage it, are sort of guided in their purchase by trusted advisors. But your SMEs, so your micro and small enterprises on the other hand, which is the 6 crore small businesses that Kamlesh mentioned, they're largely driven in their insurance purchase by mandates. So these mandates could be regulatory in nature, they could be client mandates, requirements for a bank loan, indicating that the promoters of this business, while these businesses are most vulnerable to financial losses in the case of a risk event, these businesses are the least equipped to take a risk-based view. And here's why brokers could play a role, or intermediaries at large could play a role in cultivating a risk-based view in this segment to enable protection. Mega and large corporates along similar lines value-added services when it comes to their insurance purchase, so risk assessment, guidance, advisory, and so on. Whereas the needs of the micro and small enterprises are far more rudimentary, I would almost say, because they need products that are simple to understand, where the terms and conditions don't run into 40 pages, are rather simplified into 1 or 2. And that are customized for their needs. Now, I would encourage you to not take this literally, because we do recognize the fact that it's not possible to customize at an n is equal to 1 level for the SME sector. But what it essentially means is we need to start thinking about mass customization at a sector level for SMEs as a solve to this. But there is need to sort of move away from a spray and pray approach to the SME sector and take a more nuanced view in line with their needs. Lastly, when we look at the claims experience on the institutional side, what we see is that large corporates either do not face the issue of their claims being denied, indicating that they're sort of well taken care of because of the internal muscle and expertise that they have in their insurance and risk management overall. And even when they do, it's more driven by some sort of miscommunication. On the micro and small enterprises side, this problem becomes extremely stark, where almost 55% or more institutions said that because of oversight or lack of the right documentation or miscommunication, their claim was denied, and 30% indicate that they were not their sum assured was insufficient, which meant that when they did buy a policy or product, they were not adequately advised or appropriately advised. This is sort of mirrored in the kind of support that is expected on the claim side. Micro and small enterprises are largely sort of in need of functional assistance, so help with paperwork, documentation, communicating with the insurer, it becomes critical for them, whereas for mega and large corporates, as might be obvious to you, is need for negotiation on improving the amount or guidance on what would be the kind of amount that they should expect. So that's what we had on the institutional side. We would encourage you to look deeper into the report to sort of really wrap your head around all these insights. And on that note, I'll hand it over to Abhishek.
I know this has been going on for long, so I'll probably just take a few more minutes because, we heard what the opportunities, we heard, where brokers are currently playing a role. We also looked at what is your next frontier of opportunities that are available. What we now want to round this up with is essentially what does it now mean for us as a community of brokers. And if we go on the next slide, and this actually forms the core, the heart of the last chapter of the report that you will see. We spoke about there are different archetypes of customers. So on the retail, we have HNI, affluent, mass market. On institutional, we have further broken it down into not just, let's say, large, mid, medium, but also further into your micro, small enterprises. And at the bottom, you have the archetypes that we have spoken about, right, in terms of the broker that are available in the market. In the middle is what you see are the actionables that at least we are saying if you bring together the broker archetype and if you bring together the type of customer, how I or we as brokers can play a role, not just at the traditionally we would imagine we have the maximum role to play, let's say at the point of sale or at the distribution, right? But what we have taken a stab at in all humility is to uncover what role they can play across the life cycle. Here we are seeing, Natasha mentioned that the awareness is not an issue, it is an issue of intent, right? So here we are firstly seeing how we as brokers can actually play a better role in driving intent through engagement, through better marketing, through better communication, and not just, let's say, leave it solely at the insurers. In the middle part is basically at the point of sale or at the time the customer or the consumer is actually making the purchase decision, which is to say, are there segments that we can help insurers unlock, right? I mean, traditionally, there's a middle part of the pyramid which we say, right, which is most focused on. But what about the extreme spectrums of the pyramid, right, which let's say are not getting as much focus, but we clearly saw in some of the earlier charts that there is so much potential in there. Can we actually play a role in unlocking some of those customer segments? Similarly, to unlock those customer segments, what is the type of offering or the product or the specific need that customer segment has that we can help or we can jointly address that for the insurers? And by the way, a lot of this we have seen global examples, and you'll see some of that in the report, because of which we are even making some of these suggestions here for us as well. And then the last one, we saw it in the survey, enough and more opportunity is to how can we also support in after sales experience, right? And some of the other distribution channels have clearly sort of evolved on that front, and we feel it's also time for us to evolve and spend a lot of time as to what we can do on that front. Of course, there are also things that we as brokers will need to ensure that all of this is happening in terms of, number one, having the right talent in place, having the right leadership, attracting, retaining the right talent. Number two is the regulatory enablement. Number three is the public-private partnerships. And then the last one being capital, which again, we spoke about that there is a lot of positive trend in terms of the inflow of capital which is coming. But we believe that is just the beginning and there is a lot more to come for us to really sort of be able to achieve all of this. Well, with this, I'll wrap it up. But I'll take the liberty of just saying our hashtag, which is broker hai to bharosa hai, and that is really the objective and the intent with which we have, built this the report. So thank you, and I'm not sure how much time we have, but happy to take questions if there are any.
Have you done any sense on the future forecast you believe the broking industry can have as a market share or as an overall sense in the Indian market in next future? I know everybody talks about 35% current market share, but what do you see in the next few years for brokers to contribute?
So, while we haven't tried to put a number, we've done a lot of projections, we haven't tried to put a number to channel shares. Overall, what we do believe is that broking as a channel will be on a very positive growth path. And the reason for that is that while insurance expands and grows as an industry, distribution is in other channels shrinking. So you will see that agent pools are shrinking. The agency channel, and this is more using an anecdotal example here, but you will see that people who used to be agents, their children no longer want to be agents, right? So agency as a whole is shrinking. And so given that insurance tends to be 90% or more intermediary led, there's a very strong opportunity that we believe exists for the broker channel, especially as customers get more aware and also expect more. We live in a day and age where customers are now expecting more and more levels of service. Can other channels enable that for the customer is a good question to ask. And in that light, we do believe that brokers can play a role with the overall sort of caveat that the value proposition evolves in the nature that we've highlighted in the report.
If I may just perhaps add on to everything that Natasha said to your question, look, the all markers are essentially indicating for the broker channel to only keep going up for a few variety of reasons, right? Number one is there are going to be parts of the growth which are going to come from, in some shape and form, more complex products or newer products that are going to get launched, let's say pertaining to cyber insurance, some of the additional complications that arise on the crop side, etc. So there, the role of the broker becomes important in terms of being able to articulate and then move the product forward, right? That's number one. The second is amongst all of the different agencies that exist in terms of being able to merge the phygital ecosystem that we talked about in the morning, including unleashing the power of AI-led scale, which can be handled of all of the different channels. The broker channel perhaps has the best possible opportunity there. The third is that especially in terms of both the commercial as well as the SME side, given the growth that continues to be there, right, and the focus that continues to be there on the group side, the role of broker is only going to be continuously critical. Now, to answer your specific question, if I take a futuristic lens of what the percentage is going to be, I think that's the goal seek that you're trying to solve for, right? Today, it's 35%. Look, it's a math. There are two factors which will be there before you put a number of whether it's a 40 or a 45, right? One is how much are other channels going to withstand / shrink with respect to the growth of the broker channel, number one. Number two is, given all the impetus that's happening in the insurance industry, how much is the base itself going to get increased by? So those are two factors which only time will say. It is very clear it's going to head in one direction. The question is the magnitude, whether 35 becomes a 38 or a 40 or a 45 is contingent on a few different factors.
Hello. Yeah, I have a question. Fourth point is becoming the broker of the future, right? And we all know that the life has changed post-COVID. And we are talking about using of artificial intelligence. I have seen we are talking only about the service, right? And we are talking also about the 2047 vision, where we are talking about insurance for all, particularly in the country, which is so diversified. Have we ever thought upon any new business model which can come up in the future or which can be discussed with the regulator? Keeping in mind that the last non-face-to-face selling, that is distance marketing, came in 2011. Post that, web aggregator covers certain part of it, which came in 2017. Post that, brokers also amended in 2019. But after COVID, nothing has changed on the distance marketing guidelines. Have you thought upon what is the business model what are the business models being followed in the developed countries vis-a-vis India? And is there any scope of coming up in the new business models in India which can be developed? Because our is a regulated business. Every business model is regulated. And have you ever think upon what are the new business model which can come in India in future? And we can jointly, along with the IBI, with the regulator, we can develop a roadmap for that, so that we can achieve the vision of 2047.
No, thank you. I'll probably respond to this quickly, but you'll see a lot of the details of that and suggestions in the report itself. But I think just one or two quick points I'll mention. Number one, we showed you a chart which said that traditionally we as brokers have played a big role in institutional customers, not that big a role when it comes to on the retail side. So one of the shifts that we were also describing for the brokers from an opportunity and model standpoint was how can we serve the retail side of the segment also much better. And some of the details you'll see how we can do that, what are the enablers, etc., that are needed there. The second thing is also, if I go back to our archetypes, right, one of the models that we were also mentioning that these digital first self-serve kind of brokers are also sort of coming up. And I wouldn't say they will displace some of the large brokers, but they will certainly be a big contributor going forward. So we've also mentioned details on what the business model, what is working for those type of brokers, and to like what Abhilash was also mentioning earlier, if we truly have to be AI-led, digital-led, technology-led, what will that entail? But I'll keep it short. But in the report, you'll actually see a lot of commentary and suggestions on what are the newer business models, and we've taken a lot of learnings from what globally players are doing, but then have applied the lens of what is also feasible for us from a regulatory framework standpoint.
We can learn from some of the other global markets. One is what I briefly, so three probably. One is what I had briefly mentioned in the morning too, which is ensuring that you have embedded insurance products which are already integrated as part of the existing customer journeys, especially as you're looking at, let's say, gig workers, or for instance, even on the agri side, which right now is still in its nascency. That way you don't need to, it's going to be a lot much more easier to have the insurance products embedded in the journey versus you distributing the product standalone. SME through the credit offering is one place where we see that, but there's an opportunity there. That is number one. The second place where we do think there is an opportunity is using the power of data in order to improve trust and transparency in products such as, let's say, parametric insurance. I think Mr. Jain had talked about in the morning. How can you, for instance, have much better data and analytics, right, pertaining to, let's say, weather conditions, geospatial, etc., which can then influence what the pricing and the metrics that you're offering for insurance in that particular space can be, especially when data can be bleak there, right? The third part where we are in particular seeing European insurers investing a lot is on streamlining the service models. In India, we still feel that the service models that we end up having, be it in the form of contact center, claims processing, highly inefficient, right? And one of the reasons is because labor here is cheap, right? In all transparency, 5, 7, 10 years later, one of the panelists mentioned, labor is also going to get expensive there, in which case, let's take an example of a player like an ING in Europe. They have avoided 50 to 60% of the calls that come to the contact center through the power of regular chatbots, AI, Gen AI, and they're also forecasting using the power of AI. That's something which we can learn, and it will also help you streamline and take pressure off the EOMs, which insurance companies will have to manage their P&Ls on.
Thank you. Thank you so much to the McKinsey team. Can I request you to please join us on stage for just a few moments longer, because I would like to invite the president of IBAI, Shri Narendra Barandwal, to please come and join us to felicitate the McKinsey team.